to pursue the kind of tenacious response that will both protect the American public here at home, but also do what is necessary to completely eliminate the risk to the American public from the Ebola virus, and that's to stop this outbreak at the source.
Just two quick ones. Still no consideration of a travel ban from the affected countries now?
That's something that is not on the table at this point. And again, the reason for that, just in case people haven't heard the previous answer that I've given to this question, it's important for people to understand exactly why that's the case. Shutting down travel to that area of the world would prevent the expeditious flow of personnel and equipment into the region. And the only way for us to stop this outbreak and to eliminate any risk from Ebola to the American public is to stop this outbreak at the source. So we are mobilizing significant resources to make sure that supplies and personnel can get to the affected region and start meeting the needs of the affected region so that we can stop the outbreak there. And that's why, right now, the travel ban is not on the table.
Okay, the president canceled political travel today, obviously, to do this meeting. Does he plan to cancel further political travel? Is the president going to continue his campaign schedule going forward despite this situation, or is this just a kind of a one-day thing?
Well, John, we'll evaluate it on a daily basis. This is obviously a dynamic situation. If necessary, I have no doubt that the president will postpone his political travel to attend to important priorities here. But whether a change in tomorrow's schedule is required, we just don't know that yet. And when we do, we'll let you know. Okay? Major.
Josh, a couple of months ago when the Malaysia Airlines jet was shot down over Ukraine, the president carried on with his campaign schedule. A senior member of the staff said, abrupt changes to the president's schedule can have the unintended consequence of unduly alarming the American people or creating a false sense of crisis. Did you do that today?
No, Major. What drives these kinds of decisions are the president's responsibilities. And you'll recall, I don't remember if you traveled on that trip with us to Delaware and New York, but over the course of that trip, I think the president called 5 different world leaders while he was on the road, including President Poroshenko, including the leader of Malaysia, including the Prime Minister of the Netherlands, that's the nation that bore the brunt of that tragedy. So the president was able to continue his schedule that did include some political events, while also tending to his responsibilities as the commander-in-chief. As it relates to today's schedule, the schedule did need to be changed so that the president could fulfill his responsibilities as the leader of the country. We'll evaluate the schedule tomorrow based on his requirements, and if we need to make a change to his schedule so that he can do what's necessary here at the White House, then we'll change his schedule. I don't know yet whether that will be required.
Is today's meeting a decision meeting? You had indicated at the top of your remarks that some decisions may very well be announced by the president. Is that what makes this of such signature importance that he had to cancel the travel?
No, again, the reason that this meeting is important is because we're talking about the senior members of his team who are responsible for dealing with what is a pretty urgent situation here in this country.
New methods announced after this meeting. Is this meeting to convene?
Quite frankly, Major, I don't know the answer to that. But if there are, the president will have the opportunity to discuss them with all of you at the conclusion of the meeting.
Have there been additional meetings that the president or his senior staff have convened here in the last 3 or 4 days on Ebola that have not appeared on the public schedule?
The president has frequently been updated and briefed on this issue. I don't know if there have been any other formal meetings that have been convened, but I know that there have been a number of occasions in which the president has been updated on this situation.
On John's line of questions, can you understand that the public watching this story play out can have genuine sense of either skepticism or possibly alarm because they hear, we know how to deal with this, we are taking all the proper steps, all the precautions are being implemented, and then yet someone who has it, doesn't show symptoms, gets on a commercial aircraft, even though the exposure risk is minimal, everyone on that plane is now being contacted. That creates at least a low-level sense of alarm about everyone that was on that plane, everyone who knows the person on that plane, and everyone who remembers hearing just a couple of days ago.
Like a fool.
Well, that's not going to happen. We've got this under control. Do you understand how the public is becoming less confident and possibly more alarmed as the story plays out?
People should continue to be confident in the response that's organized by the government in reaction to this specific situation. The reason for that is simply that we have a modern medical infrastructure in place that, again, has not been flawless. We pointed out why that was the case, that even one transmission to a healthcare worker is unacceptable. People should take solace in the fact that, quite frankly, we know exactly how Ebola is transmitted. It's not transmitted through the air, it's not transmitted through food or water, but only through close contact with the bodily fluids of an individual that has symptoms of Ebola. But this is a deadly, graphic disease.
Should not have traveled. That was a big mistake. That looks to me, and I think it looks to most people evaluating this fairly, as sort of a gap in the system. That's something that should have been communicated very tightly within the Texas Presbyterian community. Hey, don't get on a commercial aircraft. Happened anyway. Do you understand how that can create some degree of uncertainty among the public when trying to evaluate where the story is going and how tightly you have your arms wrapped around the situation?
Major, I can certainly understand the concern by the American public about this terrible disease. It's a deadly disease, but it is a disease that we know, whose outbreak we know how to contain here in this country. And that's what we're very focused on. From trying to meet the needs of the healthcare workers who have contracted the virus, to investigating how exactly that virus transmission occurred, to doing the necessary contact tracing to ensure that other individuals who may have come in contact with somebody who had the Ebola virus are aware of the risk that they face and are monitoring their own health. That's active monitoring has now been expanded to include all of the healthcare workers that came in contact with the index Ebola patient in this hospital in Dallas. So there are a number of steps that we have taken, and I think that people can be encouraged that the federal government is demonstrating the kind of tenacious, adaptive response that's required to dealing with what is understandably a pretty concerning situation.
I guess my last question is, does the president want his response team to be more tenacious and more urgent so stories and situations like this stop happening?
Well, I can tell you that the president himself certainly feels a very strong sense of urgency about ensuring that his administration and the medical experts are mobilizing the kind of response that will ensure the safety and health of the broader American public. That's what the president expects. That's what the American people expect. And I'm confident that will be discussed at today's meeting. Okay, Olivier.
Gosh, the president spoke today to the leaders of Japan, the UK, France, Germany, and Italy. Ebola was part of the conversation in each of these conversations, at least.
I don't mean to interrupt you. The conversation with the Prime Minister of Japan was separate from the conversation with the other leaders.
Okay. Together, but he spoke to those leaders either together or separately, however you want to put it.
There's been intense interest in the modality with which the president communicates with world leaders since the very first day I did this briefing, so I'm cognizant of the importance of those kinds of details.
I respect that and I appreciate it. The president has said repeatedly now that he's not satisfied with the global response in terms of stemming Ebola at the source. So my question for you regarding these various conversations is whether he made any specific asks of these world leaders or whether he is satisfied that they've fully stepped up to their responsibilities.
Well, I'll say two things about that. The first is more than a month ago, or I guess it was about a month ago, the president made an announcement at the CDC headquarters in Atlanta that he was going to make a significant commitment of Department of Defense resources in Western Africa to put in place the logistical infrastructure that was needed to ramp up our response to the Ebola outbreak in that region of the world. That continues to be a priority for his administration. The president is receiving regular updates from the Department of Defense about their ongoing efforts to put in place that logistical capability. The Department of Defense has tremendous expertise in this area, and the reaction to that commitment has been an increase in resources and personnel that are being supplied by non-governmental organizations and from governments around the world. We've been heartened by that response, and that is an indication of just how important it is for the United States to show leadership in a crisis situation like this. Now, that said, that all being said, the president does believe that we need to see more from the international community, that we have not seen a sufficient commitment of resources and personnel from other countries to dealing with this urgent situation in West Africa. The stakes are high, and the impact on the local population there is tragic. And we need to see a more significant commitment of resources from countries around the world to dealing with this effort.
Restating my question, did he make any specific asks of the world leaders today, or is he satisfied that the countries involved have met that challenge?
Yeah. Well, we'll have a more detailed readout of the secure video teleconference that the president conducted today with those European leaders. But as a general matter, I can tell you that the president did urge those world leaders to make a more significant commitment to dealing with the Ebola outbreak in West Africa. Justin.
I wanted to circle back on the question about why the president's staying here in town today. I'm wondering, I know that you said that it was necessary to respond to the outbreak, but I'm wondering why that is, especially since not only the Malaysian airline plane that went down, but everything from Ferguson to Egypt to the Fort Hood shooting, we've seen the president either maintain his political schedule or his vacation schedule.
Sure. Each of these situations we consider on a case-by-case basis, as you would expect. In this situation, the president felt it was important to convene a meeting of the senior members of his administration who are responsible for responding to this particular incident. And so the president's convening that meeting this afternoon, and because the meeting was this afternoon, the president had to postpone the political travel that he had already planned. We do anticipate that the president will be able to reschedule this trip in advance of Election Day.
The reason that I ask, I mean, presumably Air Force One's got a phone or a video conference. He could do it while he was traveling, as he did.
All right, let's go ahead and pull away. You've been watching Josh Earnest there, part of the White House Daily Briefing, and a lot of questions, the majority of questions, all about Ebola. The significance here, we know the President of the United States basically scrapped 2 different campaign trips today. He was supposed to be heading to New Jersey and also to Connecticut. We now know he is staying put at the White House, and in just about a half hour from now, we'll be meeting with different cabinet agencies to talk about the government's response to what's been happening with Ebola, specifically here in the United States. Just to bring you up to speed, a couple of notes from this briefing, questions about, especially from conservatives, should the chief of the CDC, Dr. Tom Frieden, still be in that top spot? Josh Earnest saying absolutely yes. The president has absolute confidence in him leading this charge. And there were also questions, and have been brought up before, as to whether or not the White House should nominate some sort of Ebola czar. Could it happen in the future? Yes. Is it happening now? No. Let me get you more information on this second nurse, though, who has contracted Ebola. She is 29-year-old Amber Vinson. Here is her photograph as we're looking at her now. Some of the first images we're getting on her here at CNN. She also was in the thick of it, treating Thomas Eric Duncan. She also flew on a commercial jet just a day before she fell ill, and just about 48 hours after that patient who had come over from Liberia then died in Dallas. The nurse, again, 29-year-old Amber Vinson. And so you see the map, okay? So it was last Friday she jumped on that plane from Dallas to Cleveland. That return trip was Frontier Airlines Flight 1143. She came back to Dallas Monday night. Health officials say she headed to Cleveland to visit her family. Here's what's key. The director of the CDC says, given her previous exposure to Duncan at that Dallas hospital, Vinson had no business being on that commercial airplane.
Because at that point, she was in a group of individuals known to have exposure to Ebola, she should not have traveled on a commercial airline. The CDC guidance in this setting outlines the need for what is called controlled movement. That can include a charter plane, that can include a car, but it does not include public transport.
All right, so we're going to talk about that travel question surrounding the travel people who were on board that plane, people who she came in contact with in Cleveland. Also this today, because all these developments beg multiple questions. One, how can we trust that people who have Ebola symptoms are not flying? According to the CDC, more than 94% of travelers entering the United States from Western Africa countries impacted by Ebola travel through these 5 airports. And let me show you. They are New York, Newark, Washington, Chicago, and Atlanta. New screening measures are about to go into effect at these airports, but still, a lot of people are worrying, want to make sure Ebola stays out of the United States. Many want a ban on flights from countries impacted by the virus. Is that possible? Would that be smart? Let's talk about this. CNN medical analyst Dr. Alexander Van Tilligen and CNN aviation correspondent Richard West. So, gentlemen, we got a lot to talk about.